Hey guys, it's Ryan here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're doing another Dandadan review. Today we're looking at arc number 2, chapters 9 through 17. If the first arc was the Turbo Granny arc, I guess this is technically the Acrobatic Silky arc. It's pretty good, although maybe not necessarily my favorite arc. It kind of depends on like how I'm feeling on that day because of some of the content here. So the author here is Yukinobu Tatsu. It's published by Viz Media. I don't have physical editions of this. I read it on the app, mostly because I don't like collecting most Shonen Jump titles, that they just go too long, and collecting them turns out to become kind of a bit of a chore, especially when the app is so good, right? That's why I collect, Kodansha books, because their app is bad. If they had a good app, I would probably just buy read them digitally like I do most Viz stuff, right? But I do collect some Viz here and there. The demographic here is shonen. Obviously, it is a Shonen Jump title. The genre here is action, rom-com, and like I said before, it's kind of an urban fantasy, urban sci-fantasy type series, urban sci-fi. That's not really a thing, but it's the best I could come up with. And adaptations-wise, it does have one that's currently ongoing. Season 2 is going on right now. I do own the anime. It's by Science Saru, and you can watch it on Netflix if you want. Ratings for this arc is a 4.5 out of 5. The first arc was a 5 out of 5. This one is a little bit less good, mostly because I think in the way that it kind of works out, it's just not quite as polished in my opinion. Although it is technically, I guess, when it comes to storytelling, a much better arc than the first one, because this really deals with some real stuff, right? So we'll get to that in a later moment. The premise of this arc is that Momo and Okurun have now become friends. As they continue to act, he realizes that he doesn't have any balls anymore. So he got his dick back from Turbo Granny, but now he doesn't have his balls. And so they have to go on an adventure to find them. And this is really kind of the guiding force for quite a few arcs going forward. It's not really a solvable issue at the get-go, but they at least find one of them by the end of the arc. And dealing with finding his balls leads to them, learning about other characters that also have powers and kind of developing their crew out, right? They're developing their team, right? Which is good. So plot-wise here, we have Momo and Okurun meeting up at school in the morning. They kind of do that classic rom-com anime thing where they meet up and then walk to school together or something close to it. And now he can kind of handle some of the bullies because he has a friend, right? He is no longer dealing with the oppression of the world and loneliness, right? Now that he has a friend, he can handle some of the issues. He can roll with the punches, as it were. And Momo, low-key, is kind of head over heels for Okuru. And, the fact that his name is Kentakakura, the fact that he used the same phrase that Kentakakura is known for, which is, I'm an awkward guy after all, or something similar to that. And the fact that he's a good guy, and he, awoken an interest in her, in aliens, right? Makes him kind of very attractive to her, which is really cool. This is kind of like the most power fantasy kind of aspect, because Momo is technically the main character, and she is kind of like the badass action hero in this series, right? And so honestly, like from a male perspective, maybe the power fantasy is not necessarily that you have powers and you're cool and you're the hero. It's like, oh crap, this beautiful girl is interested in my stupid, autism based special interest, right? Which is fair. That is the dream, I guess. So this has some similarities to stuff like My Dress Up Darling, in Nagatoro and stuff. So take that as you will. So they both have different classes. They're in different classrooms, and so they don't actually get to hang out throughout the school day, but they want to be close to each other. And then when they go off to lunch, and in Japan, a lunchtime is kind of like do whatever you want. Everyone kind of goes off to do their own thing. Momo and Okurun kind of end up missing each other the whole period, and they're really frustrated. Momo thinks that he's hiding from her. Okurun thinks that she's too popular to give a shit about him for lunch, and so they end up kind of walking throughout the whole campus. And nearly at the end of lunch, they end up bumping into each other and actually sharing a kiss. And it's a really funny kind of meet-cute moment. And they kind of have this moment. Miku and Muku show up, and they're like, oh, you guys were kissing. What the hell is going on? And then they go off to the rest of the day, right? While Okarun's in the restroom in between classes, he realizes, oh crap, I don't have my balls anymore. You know, I have the shaft, but I don't have the rocks, as it were, the pillar. Or he has the pillar, but not the rocks, or whatever the expression is, right? And he goes off to try to tell Momo this, and Momo kind of blows him off. She's like, dude, you know, whatever. And then, you know, Ira is introduced, and Ira is a female character. She is, I think, maybe a year younger than him, than Okarun, or she's in a different class. I can't remember the specifics. I think she is younger than them by 1 year, but that might be, you know, me saying bullshit. I'm not really sure. And she kind of interacts with Okarun. She plays it off as she's being really nice to him, and then later when she's with her girlfriends, she's like, oh, he's a loser, you know, I just try to make his day. You know, she's kind of being like a mean girl type character, and Momo overhears this and then drops a giant massive basin on top of her head and gives Ira a concussion, right? Which is pretty funny. And so then Momo listens to Okarun, and they go to Seiko, and Seiko is like, well, I know why this happened, right? It's because of Turbo Granny. And so they show us that Turbo Granny has now been put into a little cat doll kind of character. She's kind of like Cone from Bleach. And she left her powers behind with Okarun. So Okarun can now transform into a Turbo Granny character. And Turbo Granny doesn't have any powers, or at least not any powers that are related to her original spirit. The powers that she have are luck-based, based on the vessel that holds her, which is the Lucky Cat. You know, like the little cat that goes like this, right? And she lost his balls, and that's why his balls are gone, because she had his balls and his dick, and then she dropped them at some point while they were racing, and well, people picked them up, and you know, one of them happened to be Ira. She has one of the balls, and this awoken her spirit, her spiritual powers, and so now they have to go find them. And Okarun unveils his transformation, and he's really cool. Looks really awesome. Very nice. Then later at night, they go looking for his balls. They can't find them. The next day, Okarun has an interaction with some of his classmates, the guys that were bullies to him. They actually ask him, hey, we know that you hang out with Momo. You know, does she put out? Is she you know, hot? And is she good at you know, dirty stuff, right? And Okarun gets really, really angry, and using his newfound powers and not kind of understanding how to control them, he kind of starts really not frightening these guys, right? But then he snaps out of it, thanks to Turbo Granny, and it turns out that the person that started these rumors is Ira, because she knows that Momo is kind of, you know, something, right? She thinks that Momo is like an evil witch or something, and she's like, oh, we gotta take her down, and I'm gonna use my social skills to do it. She started this shitty rumor. So because she has Okarun's balls, and his balls awaken her spiritual energy, she now thinks she's kind of like a magical girl, which is pretty funny. I like that Okarun is kind of like a Power Ranger, or like a I guess he'd be more like a Kamen Rider character. Momo is like a witch character, and Ira thinks that she's a magical girl, and I think that's funny. I really enjoy that. And she knows that something's going on. She can see spirits, and the thing is that Turbo Granny tells our characters, you know, the thing about that is that if you can see them, they can see you, and this is bad for people that are not ready for that reality, right? And so, as Ira is trying to figure out what's going on with Momo, a familiar shows up, a woman in red, right? Another yokai. And this woman in red is kind of the impetus for Ira to attack Momo. They actually jump at Momo. They take her to an abandoned warehouse. And then, you know, Ira's like, Momo Ayase, I know that you're a witch. I know that you have a boy under your control. And I'm going to destroy you because that is my job as the chosen one, or the guardian of this planet, right? Thanks to her golden ball. And well, Momo defends herself, but she can't beat all three girls at the same time. She only has two hands because her initial awakening of her powers made her really strong. But now that her powers have been awakened, she can really only access a lower level of them, right? And that manifests as two psychic hands, right? And so she can't take down all three girls, right? Okarun shows up at this point to try to save her. And then, bam, the acro-silky shows up. and she tells Ira that it's her mother, that she is her mother. And apparently it turns out that Ira had lost her mom as a young child. And this acro-silky, we learn, is a woman that basically did everything she could in order to provide for her young child. Now, the kind of situation seems to be that she was some sort of brothel worker, some sex worker, who ended up having a daughter, and she kind of just had to make ends meet, and then she got in trouble with whoever it is that was running her brothel or whatever, and they figured out where she lived. They went and attacked her, they stole her daughter, and then they beat her up and sexually abused her, obviously, because this is a thing that Tatsu kind of refers to often, the horrors of this sort of stuff. And in her kind of last moments, she tried to crawl after her daughter. She tried to find her, and then she kind of just lost hope and started dancing. And as she danced, she kind of killed herself. And then in her last moments, as she was still tethered to the earth, she became this acro-silky character, right? The thing is that before she was turned into this character, there was a moment when a young Ira, who had just recently lost her mother, bumped into this woman by accident, called her mommy, and then kind of cemented this personality trait into the yokai that she would turn into. This idea of wanting to be a mother, and that Ira specifically was someone that she could call her child, right? And so that was really the big piece of the story. There was a whole episode that was very similar to the way stuff like Tatsuki Fujimoto's Look Back was kind of animated, like this kind of really beautiful but kind of very sad, kind of depressing episode in the anime. And it was really wonderful. It was really well done. But of course, it's a bit too serious, in my opinion, for this sort of story. Like, it's really meaningful, and it's important that this sort of stuff gets brought up in art like this, right? To make sure that people understand that this is horrible and that this sort of stuff does happen in Japan. But it just feels like a bit too real for what the story is about. And I wonder if this is going to be something that goes forward, right? There's a lot of accounts of people. So the acro-silky story is about people hurting people, right? But in the world of the phenomenon, there's a lot of stories of aliens or supernatural beings hurting people in a very similar way. And I wonder if this is kind of like the progression that Tatsu's kind of developing throughout the story, right? Where he's going to start talking about this stuff, kind of pitting humans against humans, and then kind of going into some of the other stuff that's going on, and, exploring the difficulties of this sort of stuff, right? I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. I haven't really read, beyond the first 50-something chapters, so, don't tell me. You can tell me, but, try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. And so this is kind of the big moment of the acro-silky. It's actually revealed to us a bit later, but I thought it'd be important to mention it now, just so you guys kind of understand why this character is so obsessed with Ira. And it's because she was a mother, her child got stolen from her, and then in her kind of moments of vagabonding before she killed herself, Ira interacted with her and kind of cemented this idea of being Ira's mother into her psyche, right? And so that's kind of it for that. So the acro-silky appears, Okarun transforms, he tries to fight her, but the acro-silky is stronger than Okarun because he has a very limited ability with his powers so far, right? And Momo tries to help, but her hands are tied behind her back. She can only use her psychic abilities, and, well, it's not really working out too well. But both of them get beat up. Acro-silky eats Ira because Ira doesn't want to acknowledge her as her mother, and she also eats Okarun. And then as she's about to eat Momo, Turbo Granny shows up, right? And it turns out that Turbo Granny has luck powers based on her vessel, which is a lucky cat, like I said earlier. And the acro-silky, in her fight with Okarun and Momo, didn't realize that her hair had been used to set up a bunch of kind of like traps, right, for her, right? Her hair basically turned into this matted mess throughout the abandoned warehouse, and then Turbo Granny lights her on fire. Everyone is vomited out because the fire went into her, and then they counterattack. The acro-silky is caught by her hair that has been damaged by the fire, like I said, and now they manage to rocket into her as she's trapped by her own hair. They beat her, and then it turns out that Ira has actually been killed by the acro-silky in, because she was eaten for the longest, right? It's kind of unclear. I guess she died from asphyxiation, right? From loss of the ability to breathe. It's kind of unclear. At least I don't remember off the top of my head. If you guys do, please let me know down in the comments, right? And they try CPR, they try to massage her heart through Momo's telekinetic powers, and nothing works. Then the acro-silky, kind of realizing that she did this, and because of her, psyche and like the meaning behind her existence, she decides that she will give up her aura in order to save Aira, right? And initially, Momo's like, we can't trust you. You're a monster, right? And so the acro-silky grabs her jaw and rips it off so she can't eat anyone anymore. And then she's like, come on, this is the only way for this girl to be safe. And so Momo becomes a conduit between the two characters and then helps Turbo Granny kind of provide the energy necessary to transfer the acro-silky's aura into Aira. And this is when we actually see that flashback that I mentioned earlier. We learn why the acro-silky exists. We learn her interactions with Aira, and then the story ends, or the flashback ends, with Aira acknowledging her as her mother as they walk off into the distance, and then the acro-silky disappears and Aira wakes up and she is alive once more, right? And she doesn't actually remember any of this, as far as I remember. She doesn't know that the acro-silky sacrificed her life for her, at least not in the moment. It's not really addressed, right? But, Aira wakes up, she accepts the acro-silky, like I said, and this allows the acro-silky to move on, and so she goes off into the ether, right? I think the story ends there. If I remember correctly, there was also another dinner that they had together to finish off the arc. This is pretty fun. I like this idea of like having the celebratory dinners to finish off arcs, right? But I didn't write it down, so I guess that happens at the start of the next arc. And it was pretty good. I really enjoyed this. I think that the storytelling with the acro-silky is about Tatsu exploring the ideas of sexual violence as it happens in Japan, and how, maybe it affects women, and maybe it's about, the strength that can come out of dealing with it. I'm not really sure what the point of it is yet, but it's clear that he wants to address this stuff, right? It's kind of unclear why to me, but I'm sure that there's quite a lot of people online that know why, right? Maybe it has to do with his past or something, his mother or someone like that related to him that is interested in this, right? But it was a really good, arc. The thing is that, for me, the acro-silky backstory is a bit too real for the situation that we're dealing with in the story. So there's a bit of a tonal whiplash, in my opinion, and that's why I thought it was a little bit less good than the previous arc. Although technically, in terms of storytelling and in terms of art, affecting you individually, this is much better than the first arc. So, your mileage for vary there. In terms of characters here, we get introduced to the acro-silky, the acrobatic silky. We never learn her human name. It's not really important because the acro-silky moves on at this point, right? She got to leave. We get introduced to Turbo Granny's new form. We get introduced to Aira, and for whatever reason, it seems like she might stick around and become part of our team, right? And I think that she does eventually because she's relevant to the next arc, right? And in terms of changes to Momo and Okarun, there really isn't much. I mean, Okarun, I guess, gets his new form. He's lost his balls, although he gets one back at the end. And he has to train in order to get better at using his form because his physical body can't keep up with his spiritual abilities, if that makes sense. And Momo and Okarun's relationship kind of develops a little bit. But there's going to be some bumps in the road coming forward, right? So we'll see those in the next arc. In terms of world building here, apparently things need aura to be alive. Now, aura is basically just soul energy. So everything needs to have a soul. And the soul can move on, or the energy in the soul can be lost if a character stays dead for too long. And so there has to be a transfer of aura if you want to revive them. Apparently nothing happens. Like, it's not like Aira changed in any way from having the aura of the acro-silky. And it turns out that yokai become real through the appearance of strong emotion, and they stay in the world kind of like ghosts, right? And then over time they change into something else, right? So that's kind of how yokai appear. They're a manifestation of someone's will to an extent, and also tragedy, right, or death, or a strong emotion of some sort, right? There's also the kind of like Japanese idea that something over time and over existence becomes so like embedded into the world that it gains consciousness, right? So that doesn't really play into this arc, but it shows up later, right? So artwork and fan service wise, great artwork. The whole thing with the acro-silky and her backstory was phenomenal. The action here was really good, very action-packed, very punchy, very fun. There was no fan service whatsoever at all, although there was some adult content here. You know, there was sex work, there was rape, there was sexual abuse, there was gore, there was she ripped her freaking face off. So it's pretty gory, it's pretty violent, but the artwork was phenomenal. The way that everything was depicted was amazing. It's not necessarily the most realistic style, but it's very good. I really like it. And ratings wise, 4.5 out of 5. Like I said, in the anime, this is a 5 out of 5. I think that the anime does an amazing job, especially because the music does a great service to the moments. It kind of depicts what emotions the characters are feeling in a better way than the manga does, right? In the manga, this is a little bit less good in terms of execution, but in both cases, I think that, like I said, the acro-silky storyline, her backstory, is too like realistic or too real or too like elevated for the type of story that this is really about. And so this ends up being a much more meaningful arc in terms of artwork and in terms of its artistic value, right? The fact that it has intrinsic value because it's telling you something and because it makes you feel something, right? But in terms of a story, in terms of like entertainment, or in terms of consistency, this is a bit worse than the previous arc because it kind of wildly varies in tone throughout the arc, right? You know, there's moments where it's really silly with Ira, it's moments where it's really scary, it's moments where it's a bit too real, and those are all valid, but they're not consistent with each other throughout the arc, right? There's just a lot of tonal shift. And so I think it's less enjoyable than the first arc. However, it is artistically much more valuable, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that feels like fence sitting. I don't mean it to be, but I don't really know how else to explain what I'm trying to tell you guys. So there's that. So yeah, those are my thoughts here on the acro-silky arc. Let me know what you thought down below. Have you read this? Are you going to read it? Did you watch it? Are you going to read it now that you've watched it? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.